My name is Tanya Kabala, and we're here today with Chick Caluwaert, and Oscar Osbo is the videographer, and we're in Montague. And Chick, if you could just give us a little bit of an idea of how you ended up here in the White Lake area. What's a little bit of your history?
Um, I started coming up here, probably it would have been in the late 50s. My best friend, Paul Stam, his grandfather had built a cottage over right next to me here now. And so he moved in when we were both 4 years old, so as kids we used to play, and in the summer he would come up all summer long, and so they started to invite me up for long weekends and the 4th of July, and so I started coming up with them, and that lasted probably until the mid 60s or so. And then I had high school and college, and so I was working during the summers and what have you. But after that, then I started coming up here probably around the mid 70s it would have been, once again for vacation time. And eventually I decided I liked it up here, and I think I'd like to buy a cottage of my own. And so I started looking around at that time. And finally in 1981, I got pretty serious about it, and eventually a friend of our family, they owned Ravenswood Resort, and they had decided they wanted to sell it. And my dad was the one who told me about it. I said, I don't want a resort at all, I just want a little cottage. And but I came up here and looked it over, and I thought it was a great opportunity, so I ended up buying that, and I owned that for about almost 20 years.
Well, can I take a little step back and ask, you're from the Chicago area originally?
Correct. I grew up in River Forest, which is about 10 miles west of downtown Chicago, and I lived there all my childhood.
And you came up with Paul Stam and visited and stayed with him.
Right. His father would come up like every other weekend and drive up, and so I would hitch a ride with them, and like for a long weekend, 4 or 5 days or what have you.
What are some of the things that you did and some of your earliest memories of White Lake?
Well, actually, we stayed around here. We didn't go to a lot of different places or do a lot of things. We just had a lot of fun. For me, it was just the experiencing of the lake and the area. It was the country. It was a getaway. It was just beautiful around here. And so we had a lot of fun. Paul had a little go-kart at the time, and we'd do that, or just now and then mostly it would be around the water, boating and water skiing. Going over to the yacht club for hot dogs and ice cream cones, and going out to the big lake and swimming out there. But it was mostly hanging around right here.
And, as a big city boy, so you thought of the area as kind of country.
Country in that everything, houses were farther away, at least where we are right now out here in the township. And like I said, this is home for me. This is in growing up. So just when driving in from the road, when I came here, Lakeshore Drive was just a sand road, and pulling in the driveway and seeing all the pine trees, and it's a nice cottage that they have. It's a 4-bedroom cottage, but it's just real quaint and comfortable, and so there was just a hominess about it. And you don't have a lot of traffic, a smaller town kind of atmosphere. Ice cream cones at Lipka's, things like that.
When do you think you first started hearing about pollution associated with White Lake?
I would go ahead and say it was probably even when I was like 11 or 12 when I first came up here. You weren't that aware of anything, but I can just remember the smell at certain times if you were laying in bed and the wind was blowing in a certain direction. you could go ahead and smell it, or when you'd be driving by on the road if the wind was in the right
What
direction.
did it smell like?
Wow. I'm going to go ahead and for me, I guess what I remember is just, you know, if you drove through Gary, you have a chemical smell. It was that kind. It was just not a pleasant smell. I think that would be the best way of describing, at least from what I can remember.
And as a young boy, you noticed that, but you didn't really associate it with pollution?
Not really. All you knew is that the chemical companies, you know, were here, and you just knew it wasn't a great smell, but you would that was just part of the area. For 98% of the time, or 99% of the time, it wasn't even a factor, you know, for me anyways, in being here.
Do you remember any adults or people talking about it at all?
Well, you know, when you would bring it up, you know, Mom Stam would go ahead and say, oh, that's, you know, Hooker, or that's DuPont, that, you know. And obviously it wasn't something that you're proud of, you know. But I think initially it was tolerated, you know. It was something that you'd rather not have, but it was okay. And I think it was probably later on, more when I was coming up, like I say, after I was in college, that I was aware of a lot more of the problems that, you know, I would hear about, Mom Stan would talk about, you know, Bob Wesley and meetings that they would be going to, and about the damage and how bad it really was. You know, as a kid, you're just not quite as much aware of those things. You know, when you're swimming in the lake, yeah, there's more weeds around, you know, that kind of stuff. But so you you just don't go out that far. You know, you adjust and you don't really think about it that much. But when I became older, I became more aware of the extent of the pollution that was happening and the problems, and you would hear people talk about, you know, what it was doing, and you know, for the, you know, the groundwater, for the lake, for the environment as a whole, and you know, then I think it was a matter of not of starting to voice an opinion of, hey, we don't like this that's going on, we feel it's wrong, that type of deal. And you would form your opinion from hearing other people talk that were, you know, feeling that same way. Especially, I think, the summer people more, you know, looking back at it now, and especially a resident here. I mean, you still had the people who worked at the chemical companies, and for them that was a livelihood. And so you know, you could go ahead and say, well, if you were in their shoes, it may not be as bad. You know, it was some way of giving them, you know, a house over their head, and a roof over their head, and food on the table. And so I think there's a little difference between if you were here for the summer or if you were here permanently too, and where your location was in regards to the chemical companies.
So most of the people that talked about it that you knew were the summer people?
Were the summer people, definitely.
Yeah. Did you know any of the workers?
No, not at that time. Now I know some of the people that worked there, but at that time I didn't.
Do you, did it change how you viewed the lake over time?
No, not really. And I say that, you know, it's probably like someone who begins smoking when you're young, and you feel like, oh, I don't have to worry about that, I'll be fine. And then later on, when you get older, you start to get a little more concerned, but now it's a habit. And well, I think the same thing is kind of true with the view of the lake. You know, in the beginning, you just take things for granted, and you don't think it's going to be that bad. And I think as you get older, you start to realize the damage that it can cause, and the problems that it causes, and at that point then you want to try to get a little bit more involved and are more concerned, and you want to fix it up a little bit more.
Did you see, besides the smell, did you see any visible effects of the pollution in the lake?
Well, like I said, there were a lot more weeds that came along. And I can remember if you were water skiing and you're going along, all of a sudden they would be wrapping around your legs and ankles, and that type of deal. And my wife Ruth, she can remember being in the lake all day long and come out and there'd be slime on their body. But for me, if it got really bad, we just would go into the boat and go out to the big lake and dive off and swim around the big lake for a while and do it that way. You adjust.
Were you aware of any of the local protests? I mean, there were times that people protested.
I was later on, not when I was younger, but later on I was aware, and as I say, Mom Stan would talk about the meetings and would be in contact with Bob Wesley, who lived right up the block here, the Wesley family. He was very active in his concerns with the environment and the pollution and the chemical companies that were here and what they were doing.
Were you, did you know him well?
I did. I got to know him a little bit more after I moved up here and after I had the resort. And he was a very interesting man. Just a person who had a lot of knowledge and I mean, whether it would be the environment or just all different aspects of life. He was just an older gentleman that I appreciated very much.
Did you have a viewpoint of the companies that changed over time?
I think probably after I really got up here a little bit, I'm going to say like in the early 80s, by that time the company had been slowing down, and we're starting to, there was enough protesting that was going on. The state and government in general had started calling the attention, or the people had called the attention to that. And so as a result, I think there was a bigger slowdown with the companies of what they were doing. And I found that, like I say, more when I started living here, that was dropping off more and more as far as pollution and the companies had dropped their employees down to 50% and to 30%, so it was winding down what they were doing.
Now, as a resort owner, did you have any concerns about the image of White Lake? And did, some of the people who visited ask you questions?
They did. Did I have concerns? I guess I'm pretty naive, I still, once again, I think that, when you're growing up, you figure, well, there wasn't that bad. I mean, there's a little bit of a problem. But I felt like the lake in general, it wasn't like you were going to go in swimming and start to glow when you got out. It wasn't that bad. And I think that a number of the resort people had heard with Hooker in general, and of course they had heard about the Love Canal and that type of thing. So they were a little bit more concerned. And also, where I was as a resort owner, I was right down from where they used to load chlorine. They had 3 big chlorine tanks there. And so when they knew that those belonged to Hooker, there was a concern, is this water safe? And, especially when their children are coming up and swimming in that. And, I felt it was, I think if you were in there, every day for 20 years, well, maybe it might be different, but for a 2-week period, I never felt that there was ever going to be a problem or with any concerns in that regard.
So it didn't seem to affect your business?
No, it didn't. Like I said, they would ask about it, and I would tell them as much as I knew, But I think, like I say, to me, I didn't feel that there was going to be any chance for a harm, or I would never have even bought the resort at that time.
Have you been aware at all of any of the the various cleanup efforts that have been going on?
Yeah, I have, and I've kind of paid attention. I thank goodness for those. We'll all be better for it. But and I talk about Hooker because that was right down from me, and of course DuPont was right here. So, but the other part is the tannery. Is another, and that was another one that you could definitely have the odor of the hides, and that was not even knowing what they were doing in the land or anything. But I have been, especially lately with the new development going where the tannery is, of what has been going on with that. When I had the resort, of course, they still were having it was owned by, at that time, Occidental had bought Hooker, and they used to have their VIPs come up and stay there, and I think they still do. And so most of it was all pretty well even kind of cleaned up in that area, but then eventually they did take the tanks out, and of course they started going ahead and doing dredging in that area. And even right now, DuPont owns land right across the street from us, and that did eventually pollute our wells that we have here for our house. And of course they ran in special tanks, and then eventually ran in city water here for us. And so I have seen a effort there to go ahead and clean it up, and I applaud that very much. And I still own the land across from where Hooker was. I have about 40 acres over there, and so I do keep an eye on what is going on. I'm still as a citizen both here in Montague Township and also in the city.
When were your wells polluted?
I moved in, it probably would have been in around 2000, and I put the wells in, and they were fine there for about 2 years. I'm going to say probably around 2004 is when I probably, they tested it out, and at that time they found out that the well on where the cabin is, where my main house is, that was the one that was a little bit worse. And this one wasn't as bad. I think this one was tolerable or doable anyways, but they it still had a pollution factor in it.
So other houses in this area had the same problem?
They had been. Up until that time, actually like I said, my well water was good. The two houses that would be west of me, their well water was good, but the houses beyond them had all been polluted. The wells had been polluted back in the 70s, or even before that, I think, in the late 60s. And so DuPont had ran water to that area, and they were on city water. The houses to the east of me, their wells are still good, and it's just the plume of where it runs. And the further east you go, the more that is affected by the Hooker chemical plant, and the more west you go from me, that was more DuPont. And so like I say, for a while this seems to be a higher plume, but I think the other thing that happens is that my wells are a little deeper. They're about 94 feet, where the people to the north of me are, I think, probably around 55. And so that can make a difference of how deep the water is and where the problems are too.
So did you test your water and find out it was contaminated?
No, DuPont did. Well, I had it tested initially, and it was okay at that time. And when I put the wells in, I had it, like I say, tested every year, and it was fine. And then DuPont started testing it, and in the beginning it was okay, and then all of a sudden it wasn't.
And so they voluntarily provided you with water?
They did.
what do you see for White Lake's future as far as the environmental health?
I'm always optimistic. I think more and more people are aware, first of all, of the environment. They realize what a wonderful gem we have in White Lake. And because of that, if you're aware of it, then you tend to want to make more of an effort to clean up all the problems that there are, and you're watchful that you don't do further damage to the lake. And I think the chemical companies have I'm going to say voluntarily, which maybe because of pressure in the past or what have you, but now they have taken responsibility for the damages that they've done. And because of that, I think that helps too, because they are the ones who have the money that can do things to bring back, or at least to attempt to bring back. It will be over long after I'm gone, I'm sure, but they hopefully will make it so it's back to what it was 100 years ago.
Do you still think there is a little divide between the viewpoints of summer people and people who live here as far as the lake and its?
Yeah, there is, because I feel like sometimes when they're summer people, you don't. You're there on vacation, and you don't get quite as involved as much as people when it is your home. So I think there's a little bit of that, and I guess I also feel that maybe it's just a matter of not. I don't want to say not caring, but you have other interests if you're a summer vacationer, and other concerns, and so you don't get as involved. Where the people who are up here are much more aware of it and much more conscious of things, and I think therefore there's more effort with those people to try to protect the area more.
Do you have anything to add that I haven't asked you?
Not really. I don't know if that's a lot of information for you or not, but hopefully I've been able to give you a little bit of an insight from someone who, from an outsider coming up here and becoming a resident here.
Well, it's a very helpful viewpoint. Thank you very much.
You're entirely welcome, Tanya.